Neuroscientists have been studying the brain for decades, but one part of it remains shrouded in mystery: the claustrum. The claustrum is highly connected to other parts of the brain, so much so that Nobel laureate and DNA pioneer Dr. Francis Crick believed the claustrum may be the seat of human consciousness.
In the brain, in the cranium, there is the cerebrum. And in the cerebrum, and in particular the claustrum is sitting right there in the middle of the head, virtually. From the claustrum there is a secretion, brain fluid. And this fluid is an oil. And in ancient times, this fluid, in Greek, it's called Christos. It's called the Christ. It's this beautiful fluid which comes from the cerebrum and pours down the spinal cord.
In us, in all of us, we have 150 milliliters of cerebrospinal fluid inside of our brain, covering the outside of our brain, within the central canal of our spinal cord and around our spinal cord. We're all making this fluid, and it's bathing our entire brain. It's bathing all the insides of our brain, the outsides of our brain. The central canal, the spinal cord actually has a central canal that is bathed completely with CSF all the way down the spinal cord. And the CSF goes, and it actually goes all the way outside the spinal cord, all the way down to the sacrum.
The word secret comes from secretion, because this secretion is a secret. And the sacrum is the sacred part of the secret. As the secretion pours down the spinal cord and reaches the sacrum, this is the marvelous way in which our body has been designed. And the spinal cord is basically just an extension of the brain. It also does thinking.
The fluid is known to transmit light. It can transmit vibration. It can transmit flow, so flow from the fluid, and it can even translate molecules.
What happens with this fluid is that every month when the moon is in the sign where your sun was when you were born, every month there is a germ or a seed planted in the solar plexus, which is just above the sacral plexus. And that germ is the oil, the Christ, which is born in Bethlehem, because the solar plexus is otherwise known as Bethlehem, where the Christ is born. And that oil needs to return whence it came, in the midbrain. You see, as the oil ascends the spinal cord, the vibration of the oil of the Christ increases. And you see, first of all, the oil is differentiated in the pineal gland and the pituitary gland before it is sent down the spinal cord. And the pineal gland is the electric portion, and the pituitary gland is the magnetic portion. So the oil is differentiated and it is brought down the spinal cord via the Pingala and the Ida nerves. These are what is otherwise known as the Kundalini and the Kundabuffer. So it arrives at the sacral plexus and awaits for the germinating of the seed once a month, 12 times a year. And if we are able to transmute that seed and cause it to rise, as it rises in the spinal cord, it eventually reaches the medulla oblongata and the pons and the midbrain, and it crosses the vagus nerve, otherwise known as the pneumogastric nerve. It's a nerve which descends from the brain area, from the pineal and pituitary glands, respectively, and it feeds the lungs and the stomach. It's a network of nerves. And this network of nerves is called the tree of life. When the oil arrives at the very, very top, there awaiting is the optic thalamus, an egg-shaped organ in the middle of the head. When it crosses this pneumogastric nerve, this is called the crucifixion. The oil is not killed and destroyed, but it is magnified 1,000-fold. And the oil then touches the optic thalamus, and for 2.5 days remains in a condition that is called dead, that is considered to be dead, and then reaches the pineal gland after 2.5 days and illuminates the optic thalamus and the pineal gland. The optic thalamus was known as the light of the world by the Egyptians and the Greeks because they knew their physiology and anatomy. And they knew that this precious oil, which descended from the claustrum, from the cerebrum, and was differentiated in the pineal and pituitary glands, and descended the spinal cord, they knew that it would ascend eventually, and that the enlightened portion of mankind were able to cause this Christ oil to ascend, so that it would ascend to the optic thalamus and cause it to be lightened. What in turn happens is that millions of brain cells that were dormant are now awakened. You see, the oil that descends from the cerebrum is known otherwise as the manna from heaven. You see, because heaven means heaved up. And the head, the cranium, the dome which sits on top of the torso, that was known as the heavens. And the heart area and the heart chakra was known as the Midgard, or the middle garden. And the generative area was known as Sodom and Gomorrah, the area of desire, animal desire, otherwise known as Egypt and hell and the world, etc. Whereas the Garden of Eden and the land flowing with milk and honey, that's upstairs. In fact, the pineal gland produces the honey, a secretion known as honey, which has DMT in it, and the pituitary body secretes the milk. This is the milk and honey. And the land flowing with milk and honey is upstairs. This is a sacred secret simply because the secretion, which comes from the sacral plexus, is one of the most important things that we need to know for physiological regeneration. The ancients used to live for thousands of years by protecting and keeping this secret and guarding it. The Egyptians built ascension chambers, pyramids, for this very purpose. And they taught the science of respecting and keeping and guarding and looking after this beautiful oil. And if you know the Gospels well, you will know all the scriptures that are referring to it. I am the light of the world. He that follows me shall not walk in darkness. The light of the world is the optic thalamus. Keep your eye simple, for if your eye is dark, your whole body will be dark. You see, the cerebrum is hollowed out, and the midbrain and the limbic system at the top of the spinal cord is the holy of holies. And the cerebellum, which sits at the back of the brain, this is otherwise known as the small brain. The cerebrum is associated with the top of the head, Aries, and the cerebellum is associated with Taurus, and the left brain, the male left brain. The right brain is the feminine, and it is connected to the cerebrum, Aries, the God brain. You see, we have the God man is the cerebrum, the Adam man is the cerebellum. In the past, people have lived for thousands of years by preserving and conserving this oil and transmuting it so that it reaches the optic thalamus. You see, what happens when the oil reaches the optic thalamus is that new blood is generated in the body. Until such time as this process has occurred, we will have old, toxic blood in our physical organisms. And in order to regenerate and produce new blood, the oil must be raised to the optic thalamus, and healing can occur. The millions of dormant brain cells are reactivated because we all have these dormant brain cells in our brains. And in the Bible, this is known as tithing. You see, this is why the Bible says you must return 1/10 to the Lord. Remember, the Lord, the Lord, refers to the gold. This is how we turn lead into gold. Spinal cord is like a thermometer. And as the mercury rises with warmth, the more so with enlightenment and consciousness and knowledge, we are able to raise the condition of this oil. And as it climbs the spine and ascends, it raises its vibration. In fact, when it gets crucified at the top of the spine where the pneumogastric nerve is crossed, this does not mean death. This means, crucifixion means to multiply 1,000-fold. And you see, not only is physical regeneration a result of this, but also spiritual regeneration. And one is able to experience the higher mind and clairvoyance. You see, mediumship occurs down in the solar plexus. there are 4 brains in the human body. The cerebrum, what is otherwise known as the God brain, the cerebellum, which is the man brain, the medulla oblongata, which is responsible for the involuntary actions in the body such as breathing and blood circulation, and the 4th brain is the solar plexus, which is more related to the animal instinctive brain, which receives images from the ether, from the air, just like the animals do. We have the claustrum, we have the cerebrum, the covering angels, the cherubim, which cover over, because the cerebrum covers over the cerebellum, and the midbrain, and the optic thalamus, and the pineal gland, and the pituitary gland, otherwise known as Joseph and Mary. You see, these 2 are the ones that are responsible for sending the oil down the spinal cord. And they are the ones that await the return of their son, who is born in Bethlehem, the solar plexus, once a month. You see, living riotously, overeating, consuming too much alcohol, these are poisons to the oil. These dry up the oil. And once the oil is dried up, the human organism dies. It cannot live without the oil that comes from the cerebrum. This beautiful fluid, the crystalline dew, which comes from the heaved up place, the heaven, and it comes down to the sacrum, the secretion, which is the secret, the sacred secret of the Christ within. The Holy Land is within, people. The Holy Land is the body. The Jordan River is the spinal cord. You see, Jesus gets baptized at the age of 30 and crucified at the age of 33. These correspond to the bones of the vertebrae. And as we progress with that oil by degree, we get our degrees. You see, we graduate with high honours and degrees. The degrees are referring to the spinal cord. And if we stay in the sacrum, sacred though it is, we do not ever climb Jacob's ladder to the place which Jacob called pineal. You see, in Genesis, Jacob laid his head upon a stone. That stone is the 5 fused bones of the sacrum, where the seed is born. The Bible's this wonderful book, and I've been endeavouring to share with humanity that it is a wonderful book. And it is a manual of astronomical, as above, so below phenomena. It's wonderful, wonderful, legendary, mythological, allegorical information. And in fact, the Apostle Paul in Galatians chapter 4, verse 25 says that the Bible stories are allegories for greater teachings. Now, the Christ within, what is the Christ within? Well, you see, the creation of the human body is one of the most wonderful creations in the universe. We have a wonderful brain, a heart, we have a generative system, a limbic system, nervous system, muscular, skeletal, tissue, lymphatic system. It's quite an amazing organism. It's just exquisite.